I bought my parents a fresh start house, but after they shamed my daughter on Christmas morning, I gave them 30 days. Hi, I'm Marcus, 37, and last month my mother told my 8-year-old daughter she didn't belong at the family table on Christmas morning. Lily is my daughter in every way that matters. I adopted her when she was 2, after her biological father vanished and paperwork was the only thing left to make the world stop questioning what my heart already knew. My mother never stopped treating that signature like an asterisk. For the record, because it matters later, I don't live in my parents' house. I haven't in years. I have my own place with my kids. That house on Maple Street was something I bought and quietly kept afloat so my parents could get back on their feet. A decade later, they were still standing on my spine and calling it stability. And in that moment, while my daughter stared at her empty plate without a word, my 11-year-old son stood up and exposed the truth I'd hidden for a decade. That this wasn't their house, it was mine. That everything they had was because of me. This is the story of what happened next. The silence after Ethan spoke was precise, clean, like the sound of a bone breaking through skin, like a scalpel cutting through years of illusion with a single sentence. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father sat frozen, the newspaper limp in his hands. Claire looked like someone had poured ice water down her back. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there with the conviction of someone who's seen too much and finally decided he's had enough. "Is that true?" my father asked me, but the question was already dead on arrival. His voice had no power in it. Not anymore. I nodded. "I bought this house. I pay the mortgage, the bills, the insurance. You've never paid for a single thing here. I just let you think you had." Claire choked on her coffee. My mother sat back in her chair like I'd physically shoved her. "Why? Why would you do that?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't filter the truth. "Because I wanted you to love me the way you love her," I said, jerking my chin toward Claire. "I thought if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe you'd finally see me." My voice didn't rise. I wasn't angry. I was past angry. "But you didn't see me. You never have. You saw Claire. You saw yourselves. You saw comfort and pride and independence, but never the man who made it all possible." I looked down at Lily, who still hadn't moved, her little hands clenched in her lap. And something inside me, something long dormant, spoke up like a second voice in my chest. Protect her. So I stood, took Lily's hand, nodded at Ethan. "Let's go." My mother stammered. "Marcus, wait, please. We didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's the problem." And I walked us out of that house, out of that decade-long performance, out of the weight I'd racked around my own neck like a medal. Outside, the sky was bright and cold. The car doors shut behind us, and I drove us away from the house I bought, from the table I funded, from the people who didn't deserve to sit at either. And none of them followed.
We didn't go straight home. I drove without thinking, letting the road pull me wherever it wanted. Ethan sat in the back, staring out the window. Lily hugged her rabbit so tightly I could see its seams straining. I pulled into a diner on the edge of town, one of those places with faded vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like regret. We sat in a corner booth. The kids ordered pancakes. I didn't order anything. My stomach was too full of everything I hadn't said in the last 10 years. Lily didn't eat much, but she smiled when the waitress brought her an extra whipped cream swirl without asking. Ethan wolfed down 3 pancakes and then pushed his plate aside, like he was done with pretending to be okay. "Dad," he said, licking syrup from his fingers, "are they gonna call again?" "They already did, 17 times this morning." He blinked. "Are you gonna answer?" "No." He nodded, like he'd already guessed that. Lily leaned her head against my arm. "Are we in trouble?" That question broke something I didn't know was still intact. "No," I said, wrapping my arm around her. "You didn't do anything wrong."
But Grandma said She was wrong. It was that simple, that final. My daughter would not spend the rest of her life doubting her worth because someone else couldn't see it. I wouldn't let that happen to her the way it happened to me. We finished breakfast in silence. Back home, I sent one email. It was short, direct, impossible to misread. Effective immediately, all financial support has ended. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Any further communication must go through my attorney. I attached the notice to vacate and the filing draft Catherine told me to use in our county, and I hit send. The next morning, my phone rang again. Mom, then Dad, then Claire. I turned it off. Instead, I called Catherine, my lawyer, and said 7 words I never imagined I'd say. I'm ready to pull the plug completely. She didn't ask for details, just said, okay, let's get to work. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Catherine drafted the formal notice and filed what needed filing electronically, then had a process server deliver the documents straight to their door. I didn't ask for a play-by-play. I didn't want details. I wanted distance. I spent the next morning in front of my laptop, dismantling every financial thread that tied me to that house. Internet, security system monitoring, cable, auto payments to help out, gone. The essential utilities stayed on, for now. Catherine had warned me flatly not to do anything that looked like self-help. So instead, I notified the providers in writing that I wasn't the occupant, removed my payment methods, and let the bills land where they belonged. For 10 years, I was the invisible scaffolding that held their lives up, and now I was the one taking it down brick by brick. The strangest part? I felt calm, not triumphant, not vindicated, just clean, like scrubbing off the last sticky bit of shame that had clung to me since childhood. That evening, Ethan stood beside me in the kitchen while I double-checked the final cancellation emails. He didn't say much, just watched, like he understood more than I'd ever given him credit for. At one point, he reached over and hit enter for me. "That one's done," he said. And somehow, that was the moment that broke me. Not the eviction, not the confrontation, not even the silence from my parents, but that, my son standing beside me, pressing a key like it was a final nail in a very old, very painful coffin. "Thanks, buddy," I said, my voice catching. He nodded. "She's never going to cry at their table again." I didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew the truth of it. The next few days were quiet. No voicemails, no texts, not even a knock at the door. Until the morning of January 2nd. I was pouring coffee when the buzzing started. My phone lit up over and over. Calls, voicemails, desperate messages piling up one after another. "Marcus, please, we need to talk. Marcus, your father's having chest pains. Marcus, did you take your card off the account? We can't pay this bill." Yes, I did. I deleted every message and blocked the number. Because if there's one thing I'd finally learned, it's this: you don't keep feeding people who starve you in return. The knock came on January 5th. I looked through the peephole and saw Claire standing there, hair tied back in a messy bun, coat zipped all the way up, phone clutched in both hands like a lifeline. She knocked again. Not loud, not angry, just persistent, like she knew I was inside and was hoping I'd still be the version of myself who always opened the door. I wasn't. I watched her through the peephole for 5 full minutes. Eventually, she stepped back, stared at the door, and muttered, "Jesus, Marcus." Then she left. My phone buzzed before her car even started. "Claire, open the door. Claire, Mom didn't mean it. She just, you know how she feels about Lily. Claire, don't make this ugly." I didn't reply. I just blocked her, too. The old version of me, the one who'd drop everything for a family dinner, who covered Claire's rent and never asked questions, who endured every snub with a smile, he was gone. The new me, I was just getting started. That afternoon, I opened a shared folder titled Family Financial Overview and added the final documents.
proof of mortgage ownership, utility account notices and billing confirmations, insurance cancellation letters, process server receipt, digital copies of the filings and notices. Every line was dated, signed, time-stamped. There was nothing left to argue. That night, Lily crawled into my bed without a word and fell asleep curled against me, rabbit in hand. I didn't move her. I just lay there, one arm around her, staring at the ceiling. I'd built an empire of silence for a family that never once said thank you. Now I was setting it on fire, and I wasn't even checking to see if they noticed the smoke. On January 10th, I got a text from my mother. "Marcus, please, the bill notices keep coming. It's freezing and we can't keep up." Blocked.
I opened my laptop and double-checked the insurance policy expiration dates. January 15th was the cutoff for everything I'd paid in advance. After that, the house would still have heat and lights if they handled it like adults, or it would have consequences if they didn't. Either way, it wouldn't be my emergency. Catherine called the next day. "They've hired a lawyer," she said, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. "They're contesting the eviction?" "Trying to. They're tossing around adverse possession and equitable ownership like living somewhere with your permission turns into a deed." I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Permission is the whole point." "Exactly. And you've got a decade's worth of receipts proving it, plus emails, plus the payment records, plus the fact they never paid the mortgage, taxes, or insurance. Their argument is a paper airplane in a hurricane." "When's the hearing?" "February 3rd. I've already filed our response." I hung up and stared at the calendar on the fridge. 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks, and then it was over. I didn't respond to their lawyer's emails. I didn't answer the calls that started coming from blocked numbers. I didn't open the letter that arrived with my father's handwriting on the envelope. Instead, I took Ethan to his soccer game, helped Lily finish her diorama project for school, and made the 3 of us pancakes for dinner. And in the quiet moments between, I sat at my desk and looked at the numbers again. Not because I doubted myself, but because this time they told the truth. 10 years, $473,000, and not a single thank you. But there was something new in the numbers now, something I hadn't seen before. An ending. February 3rd arrived cold and gray. I wore a simple navy suit. Not for them, for me. For the man who'd shown up to every family gathering invisible and who was about to walk into a courtroom fully seen. Catherine met me on the courthouse steps, binder in hand, calm as ever. "They're already inside," she said. "Don't worry, this won't take long." She was right. The courtroom was small, the kind used for quiet civil matters, the kind where people whisper and nothing dramatic ever happens. Until today. My parents sat across the aisle, my mother in a beige coat that suddenly looked too large on her, my father rigid beside her, eyes forward, jaw tight. Claire wasn't there. Their lawyer, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, stood when the judge entered, a woman in her 60s, no-nonsense posture, tired eyes. She looked at our file, then at my parents. "You're contesting an eviction filed by Mr. Calloway, claiming ownership of the property at 428 Maple Street?" Their lawyer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My clients have resided at the property for over 5 years, made home improvements, maintained the space as their own. They believed they owned it." She cut him off. "Believed? Did they purchase the property?" He hesitated. "No, but did they pay the mortgage?" He hesitated. "No. Property taxes, insurance, utilities."
"No, Your Honor." She turned to Catherine. "Proof of ownership." Catherine handed over the binder. 10 years of payments, all in my client's name. The property was purchased through an LLC he established for liability reasons and later transferred into his personal ownership. These documents include mortgage records, tax receipts, utility records, insurance policies, maintenance expenses, and written notices showing the occupants were there with permission. The judge flipped through a few pages. Her face didn't change. After a moment, she looked back at my parents.
You've lived in a house you did not pay for. You made no contractual contributions. You were there by permission. This is not a dispute over ownership. It's a case of entitlement trying to dress itself up as law. My mother flinched like she'd been slapped. Motion to dismiss is denied. The eviction stands. You have until February 10th to vacate. After that, law enforcement will assist with removal. She banged the gavel. It was over. As I stood to leave, my mother called out softly, "Marcus, please. We have nowhere to go." I stopped but didn't turn. "You should have thought of that before you pushed my daughter away." And I walked out. February 9th, the day before the deadline. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't drive by with some last-minute surge of guilt. But around 3 p.m., I opened the security camera app. Exterior cameras only, the driveway and front porch. The same system I'd paid for since day one, because I thought protecting them would somehow buy me a place in their hearts. The feed was grainy, but clear enough to show a moving truck in the driveway. My father was carrying a lamp. My mother shuffled behind him with a box labeled kitchen. Claire was there too, standing on the porch with her arms crossed, her mouth moving too fast to be kind. I watched for 2 minutes. Then I closed the app. The next morning, Catherine called. "They're out, confirmed." That was all I needed to hear. I scheduled a locksmith and a deep clean crew for noon. When I arrived, the house was empty. It was the first time I'd stepped foot inside since Christmas morning, and it felt strange. Not painful, not nostalgic, just quiet. No decorations, no furniture, just walls and carpet and air that no longer smelled like someone else's life. The cleaner nodded politely when I arrived. "Place is in decent shape," he said. "A few scratches here and there, nothing a fresh coat of paint won't fix." I wandered room to room while they worked. The master bedroom, the guest bath, the kitchen where my mother used to brag about her signature glaze she bought pre-made. In the living room, I found a folded note on the windowsill. Torn notebook paper, my mother's handwriting. "We're sorry. We didn't know. Please forgive us." That was it. No names, no promises, no "love, Mom." Just a 3-line apology, left like a receipt. I folded it, slipped it in my coat pocket, and said nothing. Not because I planned to forgive her, but because I wanted to remember.
Not the apology, but the silence that had come before it. The silence when Lily's plate was pushed away. The silence when I stood up. The silence when no one stopped me. By the time I left, the house was mine in every sense. Not because the paperwork said so, because they were gone. I sold the house 2 weeks later. Didn't stage it, didn't repaint, didn't fix the tiny crack in the upstairs bathroom tile that annoyed my mother for years. Just listed it as is, price to move, and accepted a cash offer that didn't ask questions. The buyer was a young couple, newly married, expecting their first child. They walked through the place wide-eyed, talking about where they'd put the crib, how they'd host holidays, how the kitchen had good bones. I shook the husband's hand and signed the papers without hesitation. I didn't want the house. I didn't want its rooms or its walls or the echoes of the years I'd spent being unseen in them. I didn't want to feel its carpets under my feet and remember the morning my daughter got told she didn't belong. I didn't want to wonder if the bathroom mirror still held the reflection of a man who mistook silence for love. The sale cleared fast. After taxes and closing fees, I walked away with just over $310,000. I stared at the check for a long time, not because I doubted the decision, but because it was the first time in my adult life that money in my name actually stayed mine. I opened 2 new college funds, one for Ethan, one for Lily, fully funded, no strings attached, locked tight until they needed it. I set up trusts, I reworked my own savings, I moved everything out of the shadowy shell accounts I'd created for my parents and into clean, clear ledgers with one name at the top, Marcus Calloway. Then I unplugged for a week. No phone, no email, no legal follow-up.
Just me, my kids, and a rented cabin in the mountains where the only thing anyone demanded of me was to pass the syrup during breakfast. It snowed on the second morning. Ethan stood out on the porch, catching flakes on his tongue. Lily built a crooked little snow bunny and gave it twigs for ears. I watched from the window, coffee in hand, and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the kind you pretend to feel during holidays, not the kind you force yourself into when you're the one making everything okay for everyone else. Real peace. The kind that comes after the hard thing is finally done. On the last night of the trip, we made a fire. Ethan roasted marshmallows until they caught fire and laughed when his got too crispy. Lily snuggled next to me under a thick blanket, her rabbit perched on her lap. She looked up at me, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss us?" I thought about that for a long second. I think they miss what they used to have, but I don't think they miss us, not the way we deserved. She nodded, like that made perfect sense. I don't miss them. I don't either. Ethan didn't say anything. He just threw another marshmallow into the fire and watched it blacken.
When we got back home, life was smaller, but better. No more calls, no more obligations, no more careful acrobatics to keep a broken family looking whole from the outside. We had our little apartment, our routines, pancake Sundays, movie nights, homework and bedtime stories and tooth fairy visits. I stopped checking my phone with dread. I started sleeping through the night. And on the first day of spring, Lily came home from school with a painting of our family. Me, Ethan, Lily, and her rabbit, standing in a field of bright green grass under a sky full of sun. There was no grandma, no grandpa, no aunts or uncles, just us. I pinned it to the fridge. 3 months after the court hearing, we were walking through the park on a warm Saturday afternoon when Ethan asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you ever wonder where they ended up?" I knew who he meant, and no, I didn't wonder. But I also knew he deserved more than a shrug. "I used to," I said, "but not anymore." He nodded, hands in his pockets, quiet for a beat. Then, "Do you think they talk about us?" "I think they talk about what they lost," I said, "but I don't think they understand why they lost it." He gave a half smile. "That sounds like them." Lily was ahead of us on the path, skipping between the dandelions, holding her stuffed rabbit like it was some royal guest she was guiding through a private tour. She turned back to me and shouted, "Dad, look! That one has 2 heads!" It didn't. It was just 2 flowers close together. But I ran up anyway and crouched beside her like it was a scientific marvel. Because I could. Because nobody was pulling her away from the table. Because she belonged. In every room, at every table, in every part of her own life. We bought ice cream on the way home. Ethan got mint chocolate chip. Lily got strawberry. I got coffee and let it melt too long while I watched them talk and joke and just be kids. No tension, no silence you had to decode, no forced politeness in rooms that didn't want us. Just us. Later that evening, when the kids were asleep and the apartment had gone soft and quiet, I pulled out that note one last time, the one I found in the empty house. "We're sorry. We didn't know. Please forgive us." I sat with it for a few minutes, and then I shredded it, because I realized something. I didn't need an apology that came too late. I didn't need closure that only served them. I had already closed the door, and this time I wasn't waiting on the other side hoping someone would knock. I opened a blank document on my laptop and wrote, "Dear Ethan and Lily, someday you might wonder why we stopped going to Christmas at Grandma's, why we don't visit, don't call, don't send cards. And when you ask, I'll tell you the truth. Because love doesn't mean staying where you're hurt. It means choosing peace, even if it means walking away from people who say they're family. We didn't lose anything, kids. We got free. And I'll never let you forget that." Then I saved the file, turned off the light, and went to bed. For the first time in over a decade,
I didn't dream about being seen. I already was.